Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive? Today, we're going to be looking at how some pretty small changes can actually have like huge ripple effects. We're talking like a name on a map changing, a movie stirring up all kinds of controversy, even a soccer star's arrest. You might think, okay, random stuff. What's the connection? But trust me, these things, they all connect to bigger issues.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It's fascinating actually. It's like these stories become a lens to see these cultural clashes and power dynamics that we might not even notice otherwise.
Exactly. Like, I don't know if you remember those magic eye posters, but it's like, you got to look past what's right there on the surface to see the whole picture. Okay, so first up, this whole Gulf of America thing I read about, this InfoBay article, it says Google Maps, they're going to start showing Gulf of America instead of Gulf of Mexico, for US users at least. And get this, it's based on an executive order from Trump. Yeah, Trump, but it's only being put into action now. And apparently, Florida, they were already calling it the Gulf of America, so I guess Google just kind of had to go along.
Hmm. This whole renaming thing, it's not just symbolic though.
Mm.
I mean, look back in history, right? Renaming places that were conquered. That's how those in power, that's how they asserted control. They even erased like whole cultural identities. Like think about the Roman Empire
Hmm.
or when, colonial powers would go in and rename everything. They'd force their own language, their values onto the map.
Mm.
Literally changed how people saw the world.
Wow. Yeah, that's powerful. It's like saying, this is ours now. Kind of rubs me the wrong way. I wonder how do people in Mexico, how do they feel about this? Seeing their Gulf renamed on a map that they use every day.
Right. It's got to feel like a part of their identity is being like diminished.
Absolutely. And it makes you think, maps, we always think they're objective, like they're just showing us what's there. But really they can be used to reinforce power, like you're saying, or even to promote a certain way of looking at things.
Definitely. And this isn't new. Think about the Sea of Japan. South Korea calls it the East Sea, right? So if
Yeah.
you're in one place looking at Google Maps, you see one name. Go somewhere else, boom, different name.
So who gets to decide whose perspective matters?
It's messy.
Right.
Right. And to make it even messier, Dan Crenshaw, he's a Republican senator. Well, he's calling on Apple to do the same thing as Google, like jump on the bandwagon. Even these tech giants, they get caught up in these naming fights.
It's a good reminder that even now in like the digital age, geography, names, they're all tied up in politics.
Yeah, big time. Okay, well, speaking of changing names and who's got the power, that same InfoBay article, it talks about another Trump-era order. This one's about Denali, the tallest mountain in North America. Remember, Obama changed it from Matt McKinley to Denali
Yeah.
to, like, honor the Alaskan natives. Well, Trump, he went and reversed it, said it was all about McKinley's legacy. This whole back and forth over the name Denali, it's layered. For Alaskan natives, Denali, it's not just a name. It's huge for them, culturally, spiritually. It's been their name for the mountain, like forever. When Obama made that change, it was a big deal, like respect and reconciliation.
Mm.
Then Trump comes along, reverses it, and it just reignites this debate about like whose history matters more, whose voices get heard.
Totally. And isn't it something that Trump, when he was praising McKinley, he said McKinley made the country rich through tariffs and talent? Feels pretty relevant now with all the trade wars going on.
Yeah, you can definitely see the parallels, right, to like current political stuff. It shows how leaders, they use names, they use historical figures to push their own agendas and shape how people see things, both the Gulf of America thing and the Denali thing. They show how just renaming something, which seems so simple, can be used to tell a specific story
Yeah.
and to shift who's got the power.
It makes me think, like, imagine I'm standing at the top of Denali, right? And I'm thinking about all this history, this fight over what to call it. Would it change how I experience that, how I feel about the mountain? It would add a whole other dimension, that's for sure.
Yeah, it definitely makes you think about like the stories we tell about places and how those stories can change, depending on who's in charge.
Right, right. Okay, let's shift gears for a sec. Talk about something a little more personal. This article from Bolivar, Mexico caught my eye. It's about Raja Nengolan. He used to play soccer for Inter Milan. Well, he was just arrested for drug trafficking in Belgium. It's a crazy story, and the timing is just wild.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So, so the article says he had just scored this amazing goal, like an Olympic goal, I think they call it. Basically, he scored straight from a corner kick, in his new team's debut.
Wow.
So 1 minute he's on top of the world, and then bam, serious charges.
It's a rough fall from grace, man.
Yeah. It is. And the article mentions that, yeah, Nanglong was super talented, but he also had this reputation, for some off-field issues. Do you think there's a connection there, like between the talent and the struggles?
That's tough to say. I mean, it's easy to want to connect the dots, but we can't really know what's going on in someone's head, what drives their choices. At the
Yep.
end of the day, athletes they're just people.
Right.
They're their own stuff going on, their own demons to fight.
Yeah, you're right. But this goes beyond like the typical bad boy athlete thing.
Yeah.
The article says one of Nangalon's associates, he was convicted back in 2016 for cocaine smuggling that was tied to Hezbollah.
Whoa. Okay, that adds a whole other layer to this.
It does. It makes you think, do we, like, as fans, do we look the other way when it comes to athletes' personal lives? As long as they're performing on the field, we're okay with it. And then when something like this comes out, how does it change how we see them? Are they still heroes? Or does it, like, tarnish everything?
It definitely challenges the image we create of these public figures, right?
Yeah.
Like the stories we tell ourselves about them.
For sure. Imagine being a fan, you're cheering for his goal, and then bam, this news hits. It totally changed your perspective.
Yeah, no doubt. It reminds you that their lives, just like anyone else's, are full of contradictions. And it forces us to think, how do we really judge people, especially those in the public eye?
So much to think about. Speaking of unpacking complicated situations, let's talk about this movie, Amelia Perez. It's causing quite a stir. I've got a few articles here from Infobay and El Universal, and it seems like this film is really hitting a nerve, especially in Mexico.
Yeah, I saw some stuff about that. What's going on?
So it's a musical about a drug lord who transitions gender to, like, escape their past. And get this, it stars Zoe Saldana.
Oh, wow. That's quite a premise. Sounds like it's got all the ingredients for a good controversy.
It does. It seems like a recipe for debate, that's for sure.
Definitely. So what are people saying? What are the big issues?
Well, from what I'm reading, it's a couple of things. First, the Spanish pronunciation. Some people are saying it's just off, like it doesn't feel authentic. And then there's the bigger question of, like, how sensitive is this film to Mexican culture and issues? Some people feel like the story isn't being told the right way, like it's missing the nuances of what they've lived.
That's interesting. Makes you think about that line, right, between being creative and appropriating culture. Who gets to tell whose story? How do you even navigate that, especially when you're dealing with stuff that's so sensitive?
That's the million-dollar question, right? It's a tightrope walk, for sure. And then you've got one of the film's stars, Carla Sofia Gascon. She's trans, and she's made some pretty inflammatory comments. This one Infobay article, it says she compared criticism of the film to the Holocaust, which understandably caused a lot of backlash.
Yeah, I can see why. That's a very loaded comparison. You have to be really careful with language, especially when you're talking about something as horrific as the Holocaust.
Yeah, absolutely. But then in another Infobay article, she's urging Mexicans to, like, stop making memes about the movie. She's like, go see it before you judge it.
It's complicated, isn't it? On the one hand, there are legitimate questions about, representation, cultural sensitivity, but then there's this argument that people shouldn't dismiss art without engaging with it first. It's not black and white.
It's definitely not. And it's something I'd love to hear from our listeners about. What do you think? Are there valid concerns about how the film portrays Mexican culture and trans experiences? Or has the backlash gone too far? We want to hear from you.
I think it's great you're bringing that up. This whole thing really gets at the power dynamics in media representation. Who gets to tell whose story? And how can we make sure those stories are told respectfully and authentically?
It's a conversation that goes way beyond this one movie. It's about how we see ourselves reflected in art, in the media we consume, and how that shapes our understanding of the world.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that audiences, they have every right to critique, to question those representations, especially when it feels like their own experiences are being misrepresented or even exploited.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. Now, this whole Emilia Perez thing gets even more complicated when you consider Selena Gomez. She's in the film, right? But she was just called out for something she posted on Instagram. This El Universal article talks about how she put up this video where she's crying about the Mexican deportations that happened under Trump.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then she quickly deleted it.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
She's in this film that a lot of Mexicans find offensive, but then she's claiming them as her people and expressing sorrow over their struggles. Makes you wonder about this whole idea of performative activism, and how genuine these emotional displays on social media really are.
Yeah, the article talks about how she got a ton of backlash for the video. People were saying she was being performative, trying to get attention, using the sensitive situation to benefit herself.
It brings up some big questions. What does it really mean to be an ally? When does speaking up cross the line into being performative? And if you've got a big platform, what responsibility do you have when it comes to these sensitive issues?
It's a tough one. It's great when people use their platform to shine a light on things, but it has to be done the right way with the right intentions. Otherwise, it can backfire and make things worse.
It goes back to what we've been talking about, right? About different perspectives.
Yeah.
You got to be aware of how your actions and words might be seen by different people, especially when it comes to complex issues like immigration and cultural identity.
It's a lot to juggle. So we've covered a lot today. We've talked about changing names on maps, a soccer star's fall from grace, and a movie that sparked all kinds of debate about representation and cultural appropriation. It might seem like we're jumping around, but I think these stories, they all tie together.
I think so too. How do you see them connecting?
Well, they all touch on these deeper trends that are shaping our world, Like the power of language, the stories we tell, the complexities of identity and how we represent ourselves and others, and how hard it is to navigate a world where every little thing you do can be blown up and scrutinized.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's like beneath the surface of these seemingly unrelated events, there's this undercurrent of tension and change.
Exactly. And it's up to us to pay attention, to dig deeper, to understand what's really going on.
Right. And to recognize that these conversations are not just happening out there somewhere. They're happening in our own lives, in the
Yeah.
choices we make, in the media we consume, and the way we interact with each other.
Absolutely. So, to our listeners, what do you make of all this? Have you noticed these trends playing out in your own lives? We want to hear your thoughts, share your experiences with us on social media, and let's keep this conversation going.
I think that's a great place to wrap things up for today. But remember, this is just the beginning of the conversation. There's always more to explore, more to learn, more to discuss.
Totally agree. So, until next time, stay curious, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep. We'll see you then.
Yeah, it's like under the surface of all these things that seem like they have nothing to do with each other, there's this current, this feeling that things are shifting, things are changing.
Exactly. And we got to be paying attention, like not just skimming the headlines, but really diving in and trying to figure out what it all means.
Right. And I think the key is it's not just about what's happening out there in the world, it's about what's happening in our own lives too.
Yeah.
Like how are these trends playing out in the choices we make, the things we watch, the way we talk to each other? It's all connected.
It is. And I think that's something we really want to hear from our listeners about. Have you noticed these trends we're talking about, like showing up in your own lives? Hit us up on social media. Let us know your thoughts, your experiences. We want to keep this conversation going.
That's a great idea. And I think that's probably a good place for us to wrap things up for today. But, this is just the start of the conversation, right? There's always more to explore, more to learn, more to talk about.
100%.
Yeah.
So until next time, stay curious, keep those questions coming, and keep diving deep. We'll see you then. They all touch on these deeper currents that are shaping our world, The power of language and narratives, the complexities of identity and representation, and the challenges of navigating a world where every action can be amplified and scrutinized.
Yeah, exactly. We've seen how even seemingly small changes, like renaming a gulf or a mountain, can have these huge ripple effects.
Right.
Uncovering these historical power dynamics and sparking these important conversations about who gets to control the narrative.
And then you've got the Emilia Perez controversy, which really shines a light on how sensitive issues of cultural representation play out in the world of art and entertainment. It's like a reminder that we can't just passively consume media, We need to be engaged, we need to be asking questions, and being mindful of the messages it's sending.
And that brings us back to Selena Gomez in that video, which really highlights the complexities of using your platform to speak out about important issues. It's a good thing when people with influence use their voice to raise awareness, but it's a delicate balance,
Right.
It has to be done with real intention, with a deep understanding of all the nuances.
Otherwise, it can come across as performative, and then you're not helping anyone. You might even be making things worse. It's like you said before, we need to be more aware of how our actions and words might be seen by different groups, especially with these tough issues like immigration and cultural identity.
Yeah, it's about listening more than speaking sometimes. It's about learning and engaging in these conversations, but with humility and with a willingness to see things from different perspectives.
So what can we do? As individuals, I mean, we've covered so much today, it can feel kind of overwhelming. But I think there's a common thread here running through all these stories.
Definitely, I think so too.
What do you see? What's the connection?
Well, in a world where we're just bombarded with information, it's more important than ever to be critical consumers of what we read and see, right?
Hmm.
Don't just accept those surface level narratives, you know. Dig deeper, question your assumptions, look for different perspectives.
Yeah, like we've been saying, don't just skim the surface. Dive deep. Challenge yourself to understand these complex issues, to form your own informed opinions.
And remember, even things that seem small, they can have big consequences. The name of a gulf, how a movie portrays a culture, a celebrity's video. These things can start important conversations. They can force us to face our own biases, our own assumptions.
It's about staying curious, staying engaged, and being willing to challenge our own perspectives.
Exactly. Because at the end of the day, that critical thinking, that open-mindedness,
Yeah.
that's what's going to help us make sense of this crazy, complicated world.
So, to our listeners, keep those minds curious, keep those hearts open. Until next time, keep diving deep. We'll see you then.